That defense looks like they're going to leak goals in from every angle. My God, like I've never known a team to look this, unless you're called Luton or Sheffield United. Social media derby. How you doing, Jonty? You good?
Yeah, not too bad. Some international football is always putting me to sleep, but there was some rugby as well, which is not the subject of this podcast, but nevertheless, it kept me sane this weekend.
Yeah, it's been obviously for those that haven't been paying attention to what's been going on the last couple of weeks. It's international break, the most boring period for anyone who's a Premier League fan or general football fan, because I'm of the view anyway. I think Johns might disagree when it comes to the World Cup, but that international football is absolutely wank. So there's not.
It's
much
not
fun
bad when
on.
Japan batter Germany though. That's always fun.
That's very true. And I like Hansi Flick, but he was going to get sacked regardless. And if anyone could do it, I'm glad it was one of us. So well done.
Come on.
Well done, the land of the rising sun. Good lads. But anyway, we're not here to talk about them either. Let's kick off the podcast, Johnson. Do like a very brief season so far review. We've obviously both our teams only have 4 games, contrasting results. But we'll start with you guys, man, because I feel like it's been quite a muted reaction to the fact that you've got 10 points out of 12, beaten a top 6 rival, won away at Palace. And yet kind of there's a bit of, I don't know, it doesn't seem like there's doom and gloom, but there's not as much optimism as maybe you think there might be.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense though, based off of just like how we were kind of flying at this point last season, and then comparing it directly with the first 4 results this season. I know that they haven't been, in terms of actual like outcomes and number of points, they haven't been terrible. But I think you'll agree that the performances for the most part have not been great. I haven't seen that kind of exciting Arsenal that we saw for a large part of the season last season. I haven't seen them yet. And, obviously losing to Crystal Palace doesn't help. And some of those squeaky results, against Nottingham Forest and then the draw with Fulham.
You beat Crystal Palace though.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. No, yeah. But I mean, like the squeaky results, I guess. So, against Nottingham Forest, squeaky. Against Fulham, squeaky. Even against Crystal Palace, it wasn't like we weren't dominating the game. And I think the 1-0 scoreline was about right. And then against you lot, that was squeaky. Right? I can admit it was great. And the feeling was amazing. But, two last-minute type goals, 96th minute and 99th minute, that's not a comfortable fixture. And I think for only 4 games into the season, heart rates are rising already. So that's probably where that muted reaction comes from.
No, that makes sense, man. Obviously, it's got to do with performance, isn't it? But I think it's slightly harsh, and I get it. You guys have adjusted your expectations now after last season, so you're holding your team, a very young team still. I think it's worth mentioning, right? Like to a slightly higher standard than last year. And if you do compare it that way, I can understand. I think you were good in large parts against Forest, but it wasn't the complete performance. And the way it ended kind of left a sour taste in the mouth. It felt like a little bit closer and a bit more of a nip and tuck game than I think it was in reality. I think the Palace one, harsh. We've talked about it. Tomiyasu doesn't deserve 2 yellows and get sent off. But that changes the whole landscape of the game, and the fact that makes that result really good, right? The Fulham one, I think, is the one where you can look at and say that was really disappointing for start, because you bookended it with like a drop in levels. Whereas I feel like you were okay in the middle. You started poorly, ended quite poorly, and they had 10 men, so it kind of just feels bad. So I get it, man. But in terms of player performances, do you have any standout players that you'd want to call out so far this season, and the same for the opposite side, who you think need to like really fix up?
I mean, I think there's a few different candidates for like the best performers. I definitely think so far this season, Martinelli has been amazing, right? I know that he there's been some weird shouts about not getting rid of him, but it's a place in our team where we could upgrade and all of that kind of stuff. And I guess at a certain level, yes, of course, we could upgrade because people like Mbappe exist and whatever else. But if you think about who we can actually get, I don't think it's terrible. So I think Martinelli is definitely not getting enough of the limelight. Rice has been a superstar since he's come to the club. Obviously, he plays in a position that doesn't get a whole lot of limelight, but you saw it in the Man United game. That guy, already he kind of lives for Arsenal. He's been very, very solid in the midfield. Unfortunately, not solid enough to make up for some of the people I'm going to call out in the worst performers part. But the only other person I'd want to bring up is Saliba. I feel like we're all getting used to the fact like, oh, Rolls Royce and all of that, and not to big it up too much, but there's already quite a lot of plaudits for Saliba. And because of that, you tend to forget just how well he has been playing. And I know obviously our defensive performances haven't always been great. I think that's mainly a result of the system that we've been playing. But Saliba has looked class again and just shown to the Arsenal fans what a big miss he was back end of last season and how important he really is to that defence, right? So I think in my mind, those are the best performers. I think if we're talking about worst performers, there's a couple of shouts. I don't want to be too harsh, but I mean, you've got to include Havertz in that. He for the price tag that we've paid, and the amount of minutes that he's played so far in our team, he hasn't pulled his weight enough, right? And he's looked, I dare to say, significantly worse than Xhaka did this point last season. And given the fact that he's supposed to be the replacement or the upgrade on Xhaka, he's got decently big boots to fill, and he's not filling them at all, right? He's got size 11s on size 4 feet right now in that regard. And then outside of him, I think, I feel harsh saying this, but obviously Partey hasn't been excellent. I think that's more of a blame on Arteta and the system than it is on him. He's just looked a little bit slow off the mark in certain circumstances, and he's doing the kind of thing that really annoyed me back end of last season, where he was just hanging on the ball too long. And in certain circumstances, he is trying to play balls that he really can't be playing if he's a right back. At a centre mid position, even as like a deep line centre mid, kind of defensive mid, you can kind of get away with those because you've got 4 defenders and a goalkeeper behind you. When you haven't got that and you're the last line, essentially, you can't be trying to play all of these crazy passes when we've got high pressure. And it doesn't quite feel like he's figured that out yet. And he's still trying to do that. So for that reason, I've got to put him in there as one of the worst performers so far. Outside of that, I think it's more of a system problem. I haven't seen a whole lot of really stinky individual performances yet. It's really just been as a team, we haven't looked like we gelled in some of those games that we talked about.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very level-headed analysis, really, of the performers individually. I think it's hard, isn't it, when there's only been 3 or 4 games of the season to make definitive shouts about who's been playing so well, because it's a very small sample size. I do think probably on the best performers, you're probably on the net, you're on the money. I don't know if you mentioned Nketiah, I think he deserves a shout because I feel like he's done pretty well. I think against Palace he was good. I think even against Forest when he came on, he was good. I think it was quite harsh to drop him in the Fulham game, and I think maybe that contributed in some way to at least the start, and maybe struggling with kind of your attack at the beginning. But I think he deserves a shout. Worst performance, it's hard, man, because I think we will get into we've got conversations about scapegoats later on, I think, in the episode, and I feel like we've been pretty hard on Havertz, but I think calling him out for being, absolutely rubbish and all this kind of stuff so far for Arsenal is a bit premature. I don't think he's been good. He needs to definitely improve. And I think at the moment he's trending along that the same path he was on when he was at Chelsea. So he needs to kind of address that, I think. But let's get into it. We've got a couple of questions that we're both going to pose to each other on this episode because there's obviously a lot going on around the club. There's less so around the performances because we're on international break. And one that's been really kind of, I feel like, pushed a lot in the media is around Nicolas Pepe. So obviously, prior to Rice, he was your record ever signing, I think, in 2019. I think the fee was, 72 to 75 million or something with add-ons or something like that. Pretty big fee for someone who was pretty much unproven, at least definitely in the Prem, right? He's left the club. There's been a bit of confusion over whether he's left for like €3 million or whether he's left off the back of his contract being terminated. Either way, um, that's quite a chunk of money that you've lost on him, considering you've also loaned him out and stuff, and he hasn't really actually played for you too much. So the big debate is: do you think he can be considered a flop? And that's the question I'll ask you, mate, because there's two, very stark contrast opinions about this. So where do you land?
I mean, my major issue with the discussion around Nicolas Pepe being a flop is actually my major issue around most discussions around players being flops, and that is it. Everyone treats it as such a black and white issue, right? As if being a flop is like a quantitative measure that we can all make, and there's like a certain standard. You hit this, and you're a flop. And I think that's mainly the problem I have with people calling Nicolas Pepe a flop. And me and you we've discussed this offline, but there is a sliding scale when it comes to successes, flops, and just mediocre signings, right? And I think a lot of people like to default to one or the other. You're either a success or you're a flop. And in the case of Nicolas Pepe, he clearly hasn't done enough to be considered a success because he's leaving the club in, let's say, an unceremonious fashion. But at the same time, I think we all forget that he had seasons of good value to the club, right? He's had multiple seasons where he's got more than 10 goals or assists in the Premier League, which I know is not crazy numbers, but if we look at that in comparison to a lot of other players in the league and a lot of other signings in the top six, that's decent, right? And so I think with Nicolas Pepe, if we look at the fee and we look at the fact that he was at the time a record fee for us, I think that you probably could say he is in between being an unsuccessful / mediocre signing and being a flop. I just think when it comes to a flop, the way that I define it in my mind is you come into the club, you play a decent amount of games in your first season, you don't impress anyone, you look horrible, and you never get played again, and that's the end of you, right? So when people are calling Pogba a flop, it's not on, right? It was a lot of money, sure, but he gave you a lot of good, valuable seasons. For Pepe, yes, he didn't give us 10 years of decent performances, but he gave us three, right? Three years of decent-ish performances, two that are most notable. And I think in that regard, if he was 20 million, I would say he definitely is not a flop. It's the only thing that really brings it into question is the fee. And so if we look at 73 million, 2 decent seasons and 1 mediocre season, I think you can say that he's a mediocre / unsuccessful signing for Arsenal. I think to me, he feels like a signing that Chelsea would make this year. And I think we can categorically say most of them look a bit floppy, right? So that's where I kind of stand on it. I'm going to say no, he's not a flop, but he's definitely not a successful signing. He is a mediocre to unsuccessful signing in my mind. You probably might disagree there, but I feel like that's a fair reflection of a player that gave us a few good seasons.
Yeah, no, it's all to do with the fee. Let's be real. That's what people kind of judge this on. And when you go to a club for a large fee, which 72 at the time, what's that? I hate to do that inflation thing, but you always see it going around. That's probably in the 100 million mark right now or something like that. What was it, like 4 years ago? Like you're looking around that kind of mark.
I think it's comparable to the Antony signing last year. That I think they would be about the same.
Yeah, it might be slightly more because of inflation, because it's literally gone crazy in this last year. But either way, it's high, right? So first of all, you weren't doing signings of that size at the time. You were pretty much a shambles at the time as well. That was when things were really, going tits up. So it was a huge expectation on your team, and I don't think the stars aligned. Number one, there was rumors that Emery didn't want him in the first place. He wanted Zaha, so that's not a great environment to come into. Two, I think the fee for a player it seems the personality type of Pepe, he was never going to be the type to be able to shoulder that, because he didn't seem to outwardly be that kind of character who could deal with such a pressure coming in from a foreign league for a huge sum, not knowing kind of how crazy we go about these kind of transfers in the UK. You don't get those kind of transfers really in France, do you? Apart from PSG, and he didn't come from that background, so I think that was a bit of an issue. And then, I mean, it was a bit of circumstance too, because if you look at it, his decline or his lack of importance to the team, basically being completely shunned, coincided with the rise of Bukayo Saka. And if you look at how Saka's doing right now, I feel like a lot of you guys, Arsenal fans, would consider Pepe like collateral damage that you're willing to take on. It's a huge fee, but you've got a guy, in Saka who's one of your own. He's unlikely to leave you, right? So he's going to give you a long service, regardless of big clubs coming in. Touch wood for you guys, and when you look at the stats, which I think can be used on either side, really, right? I think I've seen a lot of Pepe defenders use them to say, oh, he's got decent numbers, which again, they aren't crazy good numbers, but they are decent numbers. You can't really say someone with those numbers is like an unmitigated flop. There's things around it, like a lot of them come in, when the season was done, in dead rubber games and all that kind of stuff, right? Which I don't really, goal's a goal. Like, all right, I think you can weight those goals maybe differently to someone who's got 10 clinical goals, but very rarely do you find someone who's got like 10 clinical goals against people, someone who's got 10, kind of garbage time goals. I don't think that is the situation with him. But I think he might be a light flop, if that makes you feel better. So he's not like an absolute disaster, because he did score goals, I think. But I think people are going unfairly ham on him. And if he was English, maybe, or if he was, a different character, maybe you would have more people backing him up, because you do see some Arsenal fans also just say he's a disaster. It was a massive flop, right? Like, it's not like your fan base universally support him. There's a bit of discourse within that, and I feel like, for example, if Rice, which I know is definitely not going to happen, was to flop, he would still have his backers, right? He would have people to say he's a good player. But it's just one of those combos, isn't it? It's like almost like if you're in for a big fee, you can only be a success, and if you're not a success, you're automatically defined as a flop. And like you said, there's gradients, isn't it? So the next question we'll talk about then is this. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, is around Martinelli, right? Because there's a lot of stuff in football fandom where I feel like people find little opportunities to try and like take Martinelli down a peg or two. You even saw it in the United Arsenal game, right? He was having a blinder. He gave Wan-Bissaka a really good game. And, one-on-one, we've talked about it, Wan-Bissaka normally is in control of a lot of those scenarios, but he really wasn't with Martinelli. And he had a good performance against us. But you still saw Ginev say things. If he fluffed a couple corners, he was on him. And I feel like, all right, fair enough. They were poor corners, but overall his game was really good. It was nitpicking, and you see it a lot with him. So why do you think there is that kind of nitpickiness with Martinelli where you don't see, for example, with Saka? Because back end of the last season, Martinelli was your performer. Saka kind of went with the team and was slightly disappointing, and Martinelli was the one holding the ship down. So why do you think people maybe don't rate him as highly as someone like Saka?
It's pretty simple, really. It's English bias, and it's treating Martinelli as if he's not one of our own because he hasn't been at our academy since he was 12 years old or however old like Saka was when he joined. And it also annoys me because, the major thing is Martinelli, as you say, put in a great performance against Man United. But one of the reasons why I think people underrate him is because what he does looks so simple, right? He doesn't overcomplicate the game. He's not one of those kinds of players that you like, maybe Pep would appreciate, where he's trying to do all these intricate different things. And, he's doing all these things off the ball that are unseen, that are, underappreciated, that some of these kind of, tacticos will post on their Twitters and whatever else. So he doesn't do any of that. He's just pretty straightforward. Route one, I'm going at the defender every single time I can. Every single opportunity I get, I'm going at the defender. And I think that is underappreciated in today's game because we've moved away from, the football of old, where a player like that, was massively appreciated. They were exciting players. They had pace. They had good dribbling. And in most cases, they would, get the crowd going. They would really entertain the people watching them. And I think the major thing about Martinelli is that you've just got the Saka shadow. And the Saka shadow, not to, to play down Saka's role in our team, but he's an English lad. He plays for our national team. He's, still very, very young, just as Martinelli is. So when you see all of that, some of the disappointments that Saka's gone through so far in his career in terms of, big moments that haven't quite worked out for him, that shadow is then kind of placed upon Martinelli. No one's really talking about him. Everyone's focused on Saka. And I think as a result, everyone's always comparing what he does with what Saka does, right? And they're comparing where he came from, where Saka came from. And I think as a result of that, and the fact that he's not coming out and speaking English to everyone in every kind of press interview that he can, or doing these big like EA Sports, EAFC adverts and all of that stuff, or these New Balance adverts, because he's not doing all of that, people forget that he's been one of our best players for the last season and this season so far. And so it's partly English bias, and it's also partly the fact that he's having to play against, or not against, but he's being compared with somebody who is what I'm going to call kind of a generational talent for our team. And so because of that, you have stupid people like Gary Neville that are saying, he can't put a cross in. Yeah, but did you see the pass that he put into Martin Odegaard that got us the equaliser straight off the back of your goal? No, there's no talk about that. The little kind of, I don't know what you call that skill, but when he kind of did like an around the world and managed to get it to, I think it was Trossard who put a goal in as well, right?
It was
no one talks, Nketiah, sorry. No one talks about that stuff, right? That we all try and play that stuff down, and everyone's giving props to Nketiah, or they're giving props to Martin Odegaard for arriving into the box late. No one's giving the props to Gabriel Martinelli, because that build-up play was also, really, really clean, right? The little back heel he does, the fact that he gets in behind Wan-Bissaka, who, as you said, is a really good one-on-one player. So the only way you can bypass him is don't get into one-on-one situations with him. Get past him, preoccupy him with someone else. None of that's talked about. And it's because you've got quite clearly biased commentators. And I don't just mean that as in English biased. They're biased for everything. You've got Jamie Carragher commentating on Liverpool games. You've got Gary Neville commentating on Man Utd Arsenal, right? You've got all of these things happening, and we're expecting these pundits to be unbiased. And unfortunately, as much as people don't want to admit it, they influence everyone else's opinions. I hate to say it, because I would rather kind of just not have the ability to hear than have to listen to Gary Neville anymore, right? But that's the truth. Most of the population are going to listen to his bollocks and think, oh yeah, you know what? I don't remember the assist that Martinelli got. I remember all the bad crosses. And that is my major problem with all of that, is that Martinelli is massively underappreciated by both the Arsenal fan base and everybody else. And I think, again, it's because he's not English, because he's not coming out and giving everyone interviews, and it's because he's got to be compared against Bukayo Saka, who is, again, star boy, North London's gem and that. So
yeah. I hear you, man, and I think there's a lot of that at play. I think it's another thing you touched on earlier, which I think might be the number one reason, though, is stylistically. So Martinelli is a bit of a throwback type player. He's got a lot of like a Tevez, Suarez type about him, where he's like a bit of a pit bull. He keeps coming at you, he keeps going at you, dribbling at you, running at you. And like, it doesn't always look pretty, because it might bounce off his shin, or you might not get the dribble perfectly on his toe and like do, an R9 Fenomeno type dribble, but it's very effective. And there are lots of elements of his game which are improving in front of our eyes. What you just said about laying balls off and creating goals and assisting, like, that's something that you didn't always see in the first few seasons of Martinelli. So he's developing that. This like clutch gene that he's coming up with too, where he might not be scoring in every big game or in big moments like back end of last season, but he was working his nuts off and he was really effective. So I think that kind of player is being coached out of top level football, right? You see it and hear it on other content creators. They talk about it and it's true. And I'm not blaming Pep, because he's obviously, like this generation's oracle, or the last couple of generations' oracle, but his teams have always been very robotic. And unless your name is Lionel Messi, you're not allowed to have individualism. Like, everything needs to be very much choreographed. And Arteta's of that school too. And I do think Saka's a player who, I'm not talking him down, because he's your star boy, and I love Saka as well, yeah. But he's got the ability to carry out, I think, tactical instructions more closer to the T maybe than Martinelli. I think Martinelli's always going to be fighting that natural urge to do something off the cuff. And I think because of that, maybe Saka's up until now at least, his output has been slightly, ever so slightly better than Martinelli's. Right, it's very close though, and because of that, and because of the reasons you said, there's almost like a chasm between how they're viewed when there shouldn't really be, right? Like, and I think also the national team thing, because Brazil don't value Martinelli the same way we value Saka. I think that also influences people, right? But people just need to use their brain. Brazil have had some quirky selection picks throughout, like, my whole life and probably your life as well, bro. Like, there's been loads of times when you look at their squad and you go, "What the f is going on? Why is Fred playing up front?" And I'm not talking about our old Fred, but the other Fred. And he was good, but he was during periods when they had absolute ballers up front as well. And somehow you had those odd picks every now and again. And I think for some reason the current Brazil setup, they haven't picked Martinelli as frequently, or he's certainly not starting.
He came into the World Cup squad and they were complaining. There was legends coming out and complaining about Martinelli being picked. It's
exactly. And I get it. Vinicius is world class, right? Rodrigo's really good as well. So I get that he might not be in all the time, right? The competition might be slightly higher than it is for England in those positions. But he's not being valued as highly for Brazil, and that has an impact on us too. Whereas you look at Saka, he's England's player of the year 2 years in a row, whatever, right? People love him, as a country. Obviously, after not everyone did during the racism incident and stuff like that, but everyone has kind of gathered around him and rightly is trying to support him and love him. I've got like a special affection for him. So, all right, Martinelli might never grab that that kind of affection from Arsenal fans, but he should be close to that because he's really grinding for you guys, and he's got a huge potential, and his trajectory can just explode at some point. Honestly, I feel like there could be a Suarez type moment where he just bangs loads of goals because he's literally got that potential. I think more so even than Saka.
I see him as being able to reach like Son 2 seasons ago, like top scorer levels. That's and similar, I think Son's a pretty decent kind of maybe comparison in the way that they play. And I think one of the things around that is that the Brazil team, one of the reasons I can see maybe that they don't favour him as much is because he doesn't actually seem very Brazilian in how he plays either, right? He's not playing outwardly smiling. He doesn't try all of these kind of tricks that you might expect from a Brazilian winger like you see in Vinicius, right? And this is where I think that kind of maybe introverted personality type that he has doesn't necessarily do any favors in that regard, right? He's not coming out and doing a samba after he scores like you'd see from a lot of Brazilian attackers, not just Vinicius. There's loads of Brazilian attackers out there. They play with such happiness, really. And maybe he just doesn't fit into that mold. And I think, one big shout I'm going to come out with is I can easily see Martinelli being a player that we let get away because we underappreciate him and he goes on to being like an absolute world beater. I can see somebody from, the Spanish leagues, whether it's Barca or Real, somebody coming in for him in the future when we are underappreciating him, maybe when he's 24, 25, and we're going to absolutely rue the day that we let him go. Because as you said, he gets on with it, right? No one's calling him out and, doing any of this stuff or, making a big fuss about him, but he gets his head down and he works every single game. And for the most part, he's very, very effective. And he really brings a different dynamic to our team, just like you said, where you've got Saka, who's kind of can be somewhat static sometimes, right? Where he gets the ball, he's kind of pivoting on the ball in the same way that Salah does sometimes, and he's trying to play in other people, right? Maybe a little bit more generous than Salah is, generally speaking. But on the other side, you've got Martinelli that is going at people non-stop to the point where whether he scores or assists or not, if we win the game or not, that right back's going to be exhausted by the time he gets off that pitch. And I think we're going to rue the day if we don't start appreciating him more. We're really going to regret that lack of appreciation because he's going to go on. I think, he's got all of the tools really to go on and be an absolute like world-class player. And if you think about it, he's only 22 now.
Yeah, I agree, man. I totally agree. And I think my last word on this, I think he's got the potential to be, I think, a more dynamic player than Saka. And that's not a diss to Saka. I feel like Saka can be extremely efficient. Like you said, Salah's a good, we've talked about it, Salah and Saka comparisons and that. Like he's got the potential to go down that route, but there's no, Salah's going to be remembered as one of our Premier League greats, right? Like his output will make that a default situation. But I do think Martinelli has the ability to run in behind, do maybe a few more things, and be a bit more of a dynamic player. And I agree with you. Things could go left if there's not. I'm not saying he's going to be like your focal point necessarily alone, but I think he should be in that conversation. He's trending to be in that conversation in the near future. And yeah, things could go left if I think the fan base doesn't get behind him the same way they are with Saka, because I think he could do it for you guys. The last question then, this should be a fairly straightforward one because we've talked about it offline. There's been a lot of discussion around who's going to be City's closest title challengers this season. It was pretty much a foregone conclusion, I feel like, at the beginning of the season, right? Pretty much everyone thought you guys spent 200 million, you finished second and ran them pretty close last season, should be Arsenal. But there's been this surge in movement around everyone thinking now that Liverpool are back in the convo. And we saw some discussion on one of our big radio stations here between a couple of football influencer type characters. And the discussion was around Liverpool or Arsenal, who has the stronger squad. What do you think, Johnson? Do you think this is a clear-cut one, or do you think it's actually tighter than I might be given credit?
I mean, do I think Liverpool have a stronger squad or starting 11 than Arsenal? No. I think my answer to both those questions is no. The reason I say that is because you can't rely on 2-3 players and then say that your squad is better than ours. And yeah, you might go in and get better results than us, but so what? Does Inter Miami have a better squad than the best player, the best team in the MLS? No, but they've got Messi, right? And Messi's basically 11 players by himself. That is just head and shoulders above anyone else in that league, right? And that's like an over-exaggeration. They've got Salah and Trent. They're trying to get Núñez into the conversation now and Szoboszlai into the conversation now. And obviously they've got Alisson too. But they're trying to get all these other players into the conversation as if any of them have done anything near what some of the players in our squad have done, right? It's been 4 games of Szoboszlai with his size 6 feet. And now you're telling me that he's better than Odegaard, right? No chance, right? Give it another 20 games. Give it another 15 games before you start spouting rubbish. So do they have a better squad than us? No. Do they have a better player man for man than us? Yes. End of discussion. You ain't got a better squad. You ain't got a better fast 11, but you have got 1 to 2 players that are better in their position. Let's say 3. You've got 3 players that are better in their positions. No one else. I don't want to hear it from anyone else, mate.
3? Who's the 3 then?
So Salah's better than Saka, right?
Okay.
I'd say Trent is better than Ben White, or Partey, I guess, in this situation right now. And Alisson's better than Ramsdale. That's clear, right? But Van Dijk on his current form ain't better than Saliba.
Matip, big shout.
Or Matip, whoever else you want to put in the conversation, ain't better than Gabriel. Ain't even better than Tomiyasu, let alone Gabriel.
Big up, Tommy.
Right? Andy Robertson, you got it from Hull. You're so happy about the fee. What's he done? For the last 18 months, what's he done? The answer is
fans are going to be on you.
He's done cool, right? So he's not better than Zinchenko, right? Centre mids, our defensive mid is better than yours. Rice is better than any defensive mid you want to talk about, right? Martin Odegaard is better than. There you go. I love Endo, but he's not better than Declan Rice. Martin Odegaard is better than Szoboszlai or McAllister, whoever you want to put in that conversation. Don't really care, right? Their left winger, don't even know who it is at this moment. It's fluid. Luis Diaz, I'd say he's probably on par with Martinelli, right? But he hasn't proved it long enough. Right? And then up front, what, Núñez? Gakpo? They're better than Gabby Jesus, yeah? At the most I'll take is that they can be equal, because Gabby Jesus ain't lit the world on fire. But if you look at their history, they ain't done nothing compared to him. So I'm not having it off of any of them.
Because that's the first 11 one, right? I think you're right. It's hard to argue many teams have a better first 11 than you guys, right? Because squad depth was your issue last season. Your first 11 when fit was cooking. And you developed the first 11, which was extremely strong. And now you've added Rice. You added Timber before he got injured. The Havertz one we'll ignore because we don't know what's going to happen with that, right? So at least you're the same level of strength, if not slightly stronger than you were last team in terms of your first 11, which was already the second best team, right? By just the results. Your squad was the thing that was weaker or not strong enough. And I think the conversation gets confused because Liverpool's attack is deep. They've actually got probably the deepest attack when you look at any team in the league. That doesn't mean each of those players, though, are like man for man better than everyone else's best attacker. It just means that, you know, the combination of them, the ability to take off Luis Diaz and put on a Nunes, the ability to take off a Gakpo and put on a Jota. Who else am I missing from that front line? I feel like they've got one more frontline player that plays for them, and that's obviously that's five for three positions. I don't think any of us have quite that level of attack. But if you look at their midfield, you know, I know they're gassing Szoboszlai, but it's four games. Yeah, we've got to chill out with that. He's looked good, but at the same time, when I've watched him, I haven't been wowed. So you might be looking at like a Gini Wijnaldum more than a Steven Gerrard, as I've heard some Muppets call him, right? And then Endo, as much as, you know, the only shout I'll say is Asians eat rice. So Endo might be, you know, might have one over Decky on that one. But in jokes aside, he's not better than Rice. He can't lace his boots, right? So and then rest of their midfield, McAllister, he's decent and he's good, but yeah, their midfield gets cooked if you compare it with your depth in midfield. Let's just be real. And their defense, you know, they're really skirting over the facts when it comes to their defense. They're living in, you know, 2020 or 2019 if they're considering their defense anywhere near comparable with you guys. Because you included Trent in there. I think you're being very kind to Trent. I think White is a better right back than Trent. If you say overall player and attacking, of course, Trent is much, much better. But as a right back, I'd take White every day of the week. He's a better right back. And that's based on 18 months.
Yeah, but this is where they'll flip him, though, isn't it? Because he's actually a centre mid now. And now you have to compare him against centre mids. They'll just flip it back and forth depending on which team you're talking about until they find where they have a more comparable,
but that's okay,
favourable.
But either way, right? Let's get to the squad. When you take away their first 11 and they're like one or two players in attack, the rest of their squad is doo-doo. They've got no one in defence. They've got no one in midfield. It's completely empty. So all of their depth relies on the attack. Whereas you guys, before Timber got injured, you had Timber on the bench, Tomiyasu on the bench. Who else? You had Kivio on the bench. In midfield, you've got quite a few options to come in. In attack, you're not weak either. You're decent in attack. You've got Nketiah, you've got Trossard. You've got players. You've got Emil Smith-Rowe, Fabio Vieira, who's starting to look decent now. Like, it's not a comparison. You guys have a better squad than Liverpool. On legacy, they might have a close shout for first 11, but even then, I would give that to you. They have got a better manager, right? We can rate Arteta highly, but Klopp is a better manager than him so far. Has proven it for much longer. They've got a better theme song. Sure, North London Forever Stinks. You'll Never Walk Alone. As much as I hate them, that's a banger. So they might win on that. And their stadium vibes, they might slightly win on that, although Emirates is improving. So, but if we're talking about the squad, which was the question that I heard discussed, yeah, it's not even close.
And we're talking about the squad now. I'm not talking about the squad when you won the Champions League, lads.
Exactly.
I don't care what you did 4 years ago. I care about how good they are now. Yeah. And off the last couple of years, a lot of those best players that you've got have stank it up.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
If they can bring that form back, I'll take it all back and I'll apologise to all of you. Until I see that, don't at me.
Yeah, and it's not... Let's just be honest, right? We're not reactionary thinking of just like, you know, you've had a slightly better season than theirs and now suddenly you're much better. You had very contrasting seasons last season. And the season before, you know, quite similar seasons, I would say. I know they won a couple of cups and they're going for the quad. But ultimately, you know, their players, I don't know. I think that was their last hurrah, and for a lot of them. And now it's, you know, a lot of them are hitting a certain age. You're trending in different directions, and I think, you know, that point has passed. You've passed each other on your way up and their way down, and I think that's just is what it is. They got to get used to it. You know, I'd say that also for us as well. It's not just me picking on Liverpool. Like, you've clearly got a better squad than us as well, no doubt, and better first 11. So let's get back into the United side of things then, as much as I've been trying to dodge it for 40 minutes. Our results have been mixed. Performances have been stinky, every single one of them, bar maybe 35 minutes, 40 minutes against you guys. So, yeah, there's not much really to get into that other than, yeah, it's clearly not working, whatever Ten Hag's been trying to do. And our performances, we got away with, I think the Wolves win for sure, we got away with 100%. We should have lost that match. Spurs, I feel like that was probably a bit harsh, even though they played better than us for a big chunk of that second half. We could have easily been 2-0 up to go in half time. So, but it's the same old story. I can't rue that. Forest, I actually think we were decent in. As much as that start was terrible and it looked horrendous and the result looks close, I feel like good 70 minutes of that match we actually played okay. And our big players actually played all right. Still not amazing, but all right. Arsenal, like I said, 35 minutes. We carried out the tactical plan, but we crumbled, as we always do. And any squad planning where you have Maguire and Evans come in, shocking. I don't know if you can really disagree with any of that, John. So I feel like that's pretty universal, that opinion, no?
No, I agree with all of that. Yeah.
Exactly. Stinky. It's the one time everyone's going to agree on us being absolutely the players, oh God, slim pickings for best performers, I have to be honest. While you might have quite a few, Varane, and he's bloody injured right now, but he was looking decent. He was holding us together in that Wolves game, and he was decent against Spurs. He looked decent in the first half against Forest, even though we conceded two. Wan-Bissaka, to be fair, I think has looked really competent. He might be the best player, to be honest, because he's played all the games and he's been solid in every single performance. Rashi, I think, not on performances, but in terms of moments, got us the pen against Forest, which some say is debatable, but he also set up what you call it, the pre-assist for the Casemiro goal with a great cross. And he actually got the assist for Eriksen in that Forest game. He obviously scored against you guys. He was looking fairly dangerous against Spurs in the beginning part of that match. So I feel like he might be starting to cook, although his England performance was smelly a couple of days ago. Worst performers, we've got to pick a lot. But I think the ones that stand out, my namesake, who again is obviously facing some other troubles. He's been quasi suspended right now for his best Mason Greenwood impression, which is not doing us too many favours. But he's been terrible, carrying on his form pretty much from last season. He worked hard against you lot, but the bar's on the absolute floor if that's going to be your only justification of a right winger that costs 85 million. Casemiro's been exposed, so I don't think that's his fault, but he's had circles run around him. I saw that stat where it said, for the first 3 or 4 games, he's had 6 or 7 people run past him, and top level DMs had maybe 1. So if he's got about 7x their dribbles past, that's not a good sign. And Alessandro, I love him. The big butcher, or the little butcher should probably be more accurate. Yeah, not Pat Butcher. Let's chill out. He's not been good though so far. I think at the beginning against you guys, before he got injured, he looked okay. That's probably been his best performance. But before that, against Spurs, he was smelly. Wolves, he looked shaky. Forest, yeah, he's just not been good so far. And now he's like kind of injured or not injured, I don't know. But he's not been doing well, man. I don't know, can you think of any? Have I missed anyone? But I feel like those are the most obvious ones, no, for both best and worst.
Yeah, no, I agree with those. I think for the best, I would definitely say Wan-Bissaka. I feel like, I know Rashford has obviously had a lot of great moments, but his performances at centre forward were shockingly bad. So, and that's not necessarily his fault. He doesn't want to play there. That's clear. But I think Wan-Bissaka, again, I'm trying to go for the underappreciated players, and he certainly has been underappreciated. He's been obviously continue to be a rock solid wall as a right back in those one-on-one situations, but he's also improved going forward. So I definitely would give that to Wan-Bissaka. I think for worst performers, I mean, had Mount not got injured, had he played every game, I'd put him up there because he was equally as smelly as Casemiro, right? Like I feel like Bruno's done enough to not be in that conversation. But Mount and Casemiro were both not great. They were both the reason why you were getting run through. And I'd even say it was more Mount's fault than it was Casemiro's for getting the bus run through the middle of the park.
Yeah.
And I think for Leacher, he's just seemed a little off it, a little too rash. It seems like he's got even angrier this season than he was last season, which is a harder bar to get past. But I think maybe only Mount, but then even then that's harsh because he hasn't played very many games for you. He's probably not playing in the kind of position that he wants to play in. He wants to be playing more like Bruno. And obviously, he hasn't played all of your games so far. But I think, it's got to be Antony then, hasn't it? It's got to be Antony. You can't put Martial in there. Had he played more, I'd probably say Martial. But Antony.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, man. I think it's pretty fair. I think, the Mount one, I mean, it's very, very Havertz-ish. Havertz didn't really play in that position either. It's no real excuse, although you should give them a bit more time, I think. His performances haven't looked good, and I think he's had a direct negative impact on Casemiro, because 100% don't think it's Casemiro's fault. It's the reality, so you can't, disagree with the fact he's been dribbled past so much and been kind of bypassed with such ease, but I don't think it's his fault. I think there's other things that have been causing it, and I think Mount is a big part of it, along with, the wider system. But anyway, we'll get to the questions section now, and I'll flip it over to you, because I know you've got these questions for me.
I've got
ready to grill me up.
Yeah, I mean, this started from an Instagram conversation that we were having yesterday about Martin Keown and something he had said about Harry Maguire not being the real reason or the real source of your problems. So my question really is, do you think Man United's fan base has unfairly singled out certain players in your squad and blamed them more than they actually deserve blame for? So like Maguire, McTominay, now what we're seeing with Sancho. Do you think there's maybe a little bit of unfairness coming from the fan base, or how do you see it?
No, there 100% is. There's no denying. I think a lot of fan bases do have those moments, but there's no way I could deny that. Look at that. Remember that scene where, the guy's abusing Pogba in the stadium when he'd actually played all right. And coming from your own fans, that's just mental, isn't it? And we go back to the conversation. Pogba, okay, huge fee, didn't live up to all the hype, but he certainly contributed to us, and he was heavily involved for the few minor trophies that we won during the period. And yet people still nitpicked every single element of not only his game, but who he was as a person, and decided that they just didn't like him and he wasn't their cup of tea. And I think at the moment, there are some people out there, I've seen them on prominent fan channels and stuff like that, turn around and say every single thing is Maguire's fault. Every single thing now also Evans' fault. Every single thing is McTominay's fault. I don't know, with Sancho, I feel like it's been pretty split, and I feel like it's more maybe the media that are kind of going in on him unfairly. But they definitely do. I think that the main thing I was trying to argue in that back and forth was some players reach a certain level where their performances have been so bad, and maybe they're not performing right now, but the way that they're behaving, the things that they're doing off the pitch are directly negatively impacting our team. So it's very clear with someone like Maguire, who Martin Keown was backing in that post that I shared with you, is hindering our team and our performances when he's not even touching the pitch. Because it's quite clear that Ten Hag, even though he lies in press conferences and says that he's happy to have him there, stripped him of the captaincy, never plays him unless our whole back line is injured. And then let's be honest, if Luke Shaw was even not injured, he would be playing ahead of him. So I don't know what other signals he could be given that he's not wanted or he's not in favour. Beyond the point, we also just accepted a bid for him. You don't normally do that unless you're willing to sell someone, right? Like it's not like a subtle hint that people are giving him that he needs to jog on. It's loud and clear. It's so loud. You don't need me to have a breakdown and rant like I did a couple of weeks ago for it to be obvious to him that he's not wanted. And it's not based on a witch hunt with him. All fans have seen his performances. right? Maybe not in these first 4 games. I think it's very harsh and it's unfair to blame him for all these things that have happened in the 25 minutes he's played this season. No doubt. But him not leaving when it's been made abundantly clear we don't want him, it's hard for me to feel too much sympathy for his case. I feel a little bit of sympathy for McTominay, don't get me wrong, because I feel like McTominay hasn't been as obviously abysmal, as Maguire has. And he's come through the youth. We haven't spent 80 million on him. We haven't done all these other things. So I still believe that McTominay can come in, maybe score goals now based on Scotland stuff. But I mean, like he could do a semi-decent job for us. I think there's zero faith that Maguire can. He's been stripped of the captaincy, all those things I just said to you. So I think it's harsh in certain people's cases, but I think Keown's off on one when he's using Maguire as the example. And I think we go so far the other way, right? Because we don't want to scapegoat, we don't want to hammer, we want to be kind to people. And I get that. And I don't think you should say mean things about Maguire as a person and all these other things. But as a football player, he's shit. I don't know how many times I can say it on this podcast. Right, I can say it till I'm blue in the face and you'll keep bleeping me out. But I'll keep saying he's effing shit. He's effing shit. He's effing shit. Get rid of him. So it's just a bad example. Pogba, Martial, they've been scapegoated. I hate it. I don't think it's fair. I think there's been other players that we've had. De Gea even, right? I wanted him gone at the back end of last season, but people were throwing comps all over the place even when he was playing well. So sometimes you just have people that want to choose one player as the focus of all their anger. I'm just uncomfortable for defending Maguire when what else could the club do to show him to leave, right? He's just staying for money now or to be a stubborn. Those are only the two reasons, and forgive me for not liking those qualities in a football player. I don't know, man. Am I going nuts? No, I don't know. I feel like I'm being reasonable.
It's fair. No, it's fair because Maguire really doesn't make this argument very easy because he's just been so bad that it doesn't seem fathomable for anyone to think he could be unfairly singled out just based off of how bad he's been. I do think, obviously, there's a tendency for all football fan bases to do this where they single out and blame all of their problems on a single source or a couple of sources and maybe don't fairly give out enough stick to the people that maybe deserve it because they've got enough credit in the bank that it's okay, right? And I think, for example, like Ronaldo last season, right, it could go both ways. You could come out and say he did a bloody interview that ripped into this club to the point where people were actually laughing at us. And you can say that maybe he's built up enough credit that people didn't absolutely hammer him for it in the way that they might do that if Sancho came out and did something like that, right? At the same time, though, you could say, was he not blamed for a lot of things that maybe Ten Hag should have got a bit of blame for, right? The handling of the situation to the point where Ronaldo hasn't done that with any other club. He hasn't come out and done these explosive interviews to call anyone out. And maybe there is some blame to be put either on Ten Hag or on, I think someone that you like to put blame on, which is the Glazers and the general management team that they have assembled at your club. So I think I agree with you that Maguire is a terrible example to use. And I think, Keown probably should have read the room there a little bit before he used that example. But I think for McTominay, for Sancho, we'll see how things go now. If he does get back on the pitch, I can imagine you guys will still be a little angry at him and he might end up getting blamed for a couple of things. But I think every fan base does it. We're doing it with Havertz. We're doing it with Partey. We've done it with plenty of players in the past, Ozil and Xhaka, exactly. We've done it with plenty of players in the past. I think everyone does it to a certain extent. So I think that question itself is pretty self-explanatory. Just Maguire is a horrible case study to be using. So if we get on to the next one, and I think talking about Man United fans crying, one of the things that came out recently was obviously the nominee list for the Ballon d'Or, and a notable exclusion from that was Mr. Marcus Rashford. Right, I think you had Odegaard on there. You had a lot of players on there from the Premier League. I think even Rodri was on there. You had a lot of players, but notably no Marcus Rashford. So I saw a lot of Man United fans crying about this. Are you crying in the same way? Did you think it was a robbery to have Marcus Rashford excluded from that list?
I'm not crying, man, but he should have been on there. Like, and I'm not. And the Man U fans, I've seen it too online. I'll cry with them. We can circle cry together, no problem, because I think it's an absolute robbery. But they're like they're they're aiming their anger and like stuff in a very misguided, misplaced way. Because I saw them coming for Saka and Odegaard and these guys, but those guys' output was good. So I think the argument shouldn't be Rashford should be in above them. It should be they should all be in. And I saw, Griezmann was in, and I can't think of anything Griezmann's done, right? And that's not, hate because he, did blackface and has done so many other questionable things, and also led us down the garden path, said he was going to sign for us and then decided not to. It's just because he got to a World Cup final where, to be fair, he was very good in that World Cup, but they didn't win it, right? So the Emi Martinez argument we've had can't be placed on Griezmann. And then Atletico did nothing. So you're telling me the whole thing's just purely based on the fact that he's got to the World Cup final. So I don't think so, man. I think I think there are other players in there that he should have taken the place, and I think the fans have been a bit salty. They've been pointing at the wrong people about this. I think so. Yeah, that's pretty much for me. I think that should be, for most fans, quite obvious because Rashford balled out last season. Was it consistent through every part of the season? No. But was the output, was the effect on our team clear to see? Yeah. There was a period in time where after the World Cup, he was in the top 5 maybe players in the world, the way he was playing, right? So I think it's extremely harsh not to include him on that list.
There might be a bit of blame for Southgate, though, to be honest with you, because it seems like the World Cup and international tournaments are a really big part of the Ballon d'Or voting or the Ballon d'Or nominee list, right? I think maybe that's why Griezmann got in there. That's certainly why a lot of other Argentinians got in there, right? So I think Julian Alvarez got included in the under 21s version of the Ballon d'Or list. I think probably mainly for that reason, given the fact that he didn't actually play.
He's in the regular one as well.
Oh, he's in the regular one even, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he's in the regular one. He didn't even play that much for City, right? You can say treble all you want, but he didn't actually play that much for that treble winning side. So I definitely think there is a lot of bias towards international tournaments. Do you think maybe the fact that Southgate didn't really want to play him in the World Cup would contributed to that? Because England got pretty far. Had he played in a lot of those games, maybe the conversation would be different.
But you know what's irritating about that? He did actually play in a chunk of those games. The problem was he didn't play every single game because pretty much Southgate rotates in almost every game. So, I don't know. I feel like my memory of Rashford at the World Cup was that he balled out as well. So I think Saka was probably the best player at the World Cup from our crop of players. But in my memory, the big defining moments and a lot of big moments, Rashford was involved in too in our England World Cup. It wasn't in the France defeat, maybe, and God knows why we didn't start him because he was cooking in the previous round and the last few games in the group when he came on or when he started the last game and he scored a couple. So I don't know.
But do you think it was the fact that maybe he was getting rotated and getting substituted? I think that definitely why he didn't get the Ballon d'Or nominee?
Definitely. I feel like because he wasn't a guaranteed starter, he's probably been looked down upon. I feel like he also didn't play in the Champions League. People, can factor that in, even though he played well in the Europa. I think all these things, are at play. But it was a weird one, man. I think he should have definitely been on the list. I don't think he was in with a shout with winning, but you can't have a 30-goal season. But
most fans would agree. Like I think he should have been in that list. I think it's harsh to punish off of lack of international, I guess, nous or whatever you want to call it, because there are players in there like Haaland, who of course was amazing for club, but at the same time, for country, they didn't get anywhere. So he doesn't have any ability to do that. So I think for that reason, the Ballon d'Or nominees, and I guarantee Messi will win it this year as well, which I don't think he really deserves. I think it should go to Haaland. It's clear that they are hyper biased towards international tournaments. But let's get on to the third question quickly. So the last one I really wanted to focus on, and it's something that's bloody reared its head again. It just seems like an ongoing saga forever. I feel like I've throughout my lifetime, we've just been talking about this topic. And it's all about the Glazers, right? And the fact that the Glazers are now saying that they're unwilling to sell the club, or they don't want to sell the club anymore. It's not on the market. And I've started to see some rumours that, the Red Army, TRA for short, are considering starting just boycotting games because of the sheer number of people they're able to just kind of stand and block the ability for games to go on. They're definitely going to hold more protests. What's your stance on all of this? Do you think that they're like the Glazers are just rope-a-doping us? And what do you make of the whole kind of Red Army's plan to boycott games? Would you be in support of
that? On the rumour stuff around the Glazers not being willing to sell, it's hard to really judge whether it's a load of rubbish or whether it's actually true. The sad thing is you can't really predict what they're going to do. The only thing we know is they love money. But, they've got 6 million on the table right now. 6 billion, sorry. But there's rumours that they want 10, and they believe after the American World Cup in a few years' time that, football will explode there even more. And then obviously they're, the biggest team in England, one of the biggest in Europe. It'll be more valuable. But to be honest, I think that's absolute rubbish. And the way we're trending, I think it's quite lucky that they've got a 6 billion bid. If you look at what we're valued at based on the stock, the share prices right now, it's around half that, slightly over half that. So they're already getting double, and they'll probably pocket around 5 billion of that 6 billion anyway. So it's all greed, and it just makes it impossible to judge what's going on. So yeah, I don't know, man. To be honest, I'm praying again that they do agree to sell, and then this is just some rope-a-dope game to just try and get a little bit more drama around the sale, and maybe try and see if Qatar will give them a bit more money. But you never know, mate. And with the Red Army, I support whatever they're going to do, as long as they're not attacking fans or doing something ridiculous. If they just want to sit in the stadium for an hour after the game, or just not turn up, I support them, man. You got to get pretty radical with trying to get bad owners out of your club. We saw it with the Scousers when they had Hicks and Gillette. They did similar stuff, and you've got to do similar to try and get rid of these guys. So I think, completely support them, man. And as long as it stays peaceful and it just actually hurts the only people that we want to hurt, which are the Glazers, then I'm all good with that, man. I think it's got to be done. All right, but yeah, let's change the subject and get off that morbid conversation around the Glazers, because I feel like it is quite a negative one. Unless I know we're a couple of weeks out actually for when the draw was originally made, but let's have a quick chat about the Champions League draw. Both of our teams in the Champions League this year, both weren't last year, so that's a quick win for both of us. We got quite contrasting draws. Well, at least you could say one team, I think, was of a varying difference in level. So we'll go through United's draw quickly. We got drawn to face Harry Kane's Bayern Munich, Galatasaray of Turkey, and FC Copenhagen of Denmark. And that's Højlund's old team. So you've got a couple of narratives going on there. Arsenal, you guys got a Europa League group, basically. You got Sevilla, which, I don't know, some people would say that's, a good draw, but, Sevilla are always handy in Europe, normally in the Europa League, but still. You got PSV, which is a team you faced last year in the Europa League, and you split the two games with one win each. And then you've got newcomers RC Lens of France, who came only a point behind PSG last season, and lobbed Onana in pre-season against us. So they're semi-decent. But first of all, let's kick off with you, Johns. What do you think of the draw? Are you happy with it?
I mean, yeah, I agree with your comment that it's kind of like a Europa League draw. I definitely think we could have got a harder draw if you think about the fact that Sevilla came out as like the A pick, right?
Yeah, because of the Europa League win last season. Yeah.
Exactly. And if you think about that in comparison to everything else around it, I think that was one of the ones that we would have been looking at from the get-go and thought, yeah, I wouldn't mind being in that group. Mm-hmm. I do kind of fear a little bit about PSV because of like what happened last year and the fact that we weren't convincingly battering them, even though we had like a really good season last year. So I don't think that will be a very nice away game for us to have to go and play. I think Lens, it's kind of like an unknown quantity at this point in the Champions League, right? They haven't played in the Champions League, I think, ever before, or at least for a long time. And so I think from that perspective, I'm pretty happy with the group. Like if you look at like the group of death and that, I'm all right with this. Like I
Yeah.
mean, none of them are like super far away. I'm not having to travel to like Tajikistan or whatever to go and play Champions League games, which I'm happy about. And I definitely think it's a winnable group. I'm not sure I can say the same thing for your group. How are you feeling about the prospect of old Harry Kane coming to Old Trafford in a different shirt from the one you might have been expecting last year?
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping he was going to be playing at Old Trafford in the Champions League, but for us, so that's not turned out exactly how I wanted. But I think Bayern Munich from that pot are one of the harder options because you hear a lot of people. I mean, that might be a dummy's answer to the Champions League draw, but of the big name brand teams in the Champions League and in Pot One, a lot of them are kind of similar to both of our teams in that they're kind of a brand in name and not necessarily in the actual team recently. Um, I guess City, Bayern Munich, and Real Madrid are the three that you'd want to avoid in terms of them being, being in terms of Bayern Munich and Real Madrid being heritage teams, but also having, the actual players to back it up. So it's unfortunate that we've managed to draw the one of those two teams that are available for us to get. But I'm not too worried about the rest of the group. I mean, Galatasaray away, Turkey away is always difficult. We tend to always cock that up. So that's maybe one game that I'm worried about. But Copenhagen home and away, I mean, if we can't beat them, then we deserve to be in the Europa or to be out of Europe. It's one of those things. You have to be able to beat them. You have to beat Galatasaray at home. You have to give Bayern a real good game at home. If not, I would hope we'd be able to beat them at home. And then, you have to just. Champions League draws are weird, aren't they? If you win all your home games, you basically only have to win one away game of the three, or you could even draw a bunch of them and you'll probably go through. So, and our home form has been impeccable over this last season. It's the one thing that's actually looked fairly stable. So yeah, I'm hoping for that. But see when you see that draw and we're in the second pot and the only team that you've got in your group is Bayern, you automatically start to yourself and think, oh my god, we're going to get group of death. But lucky for both of us, it was Hawaii the lads up in Tyneside who got the horrible draw, and I'm happy about that. That's fine. But I think so. You think you'll get through? Yeah. Do you think you'll top your group? You surely got to expect a top. Yeah.
Yes, I think we should be aiming to top that group 100%. As long as Arteta's not doing, Higgy Haga trying to, copy
Doing
Pep
funny
again and do
business.
whatever. We need to be coming top of that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. You got to expect to top that group. I'm sorry. I know there's pedigree in Sevilla, but PSV, they're not going to be the same team you played last season. They've lost Gakpo, they've lost Javi Simons. A lot of their
Yeah,
big players have gone. You should be beating them home and away. Lens, I heard, have got a pretty intense kind of Anfield-like atmosphere in France, but regardless, I think they've regenerated their squad as well. They've lost a lot of their players that got them to runners up last season in League On, so you should be beating them. And so I think, yeah, that's fair. But to be honest, I think we should definitely get through as well. And I don't think it's as clear cut as saying Bayern will definitely be first. I think we've got to aim for getting first, and we've got to aim to try and tie Bayern up in some in a tight group, and then hoping to try and nick it from them. But I think they're definitely favourites to top that group. But it would be great for us if we were to top that group and then hopefully get one of the rubbish runner up teams in the next round. Because to be honest, if we face one of the big teams, I can't see us getting through. I don't see a a Barcelona in the round of 16 or 32 or whatever it was in Europa League last season happening again. I think we'll get dealt with if we play against Real Madrid or Bayern type teams in the knockouts. So we have to hope for a fortuitous next round if we get there.
I think you should aim for to win that group, but at the same time, I can't see Bayern losing more than one game in that group. I'll be honest with you. That's the absolute max I can see them losing. I think they're going to go and smash Galatasaray and Copenhagen, and really it's only going to be you that they're going to have a slightly tougher game against. Whereas I can see a slip up in you against either Galatasaray or Copenhagen, and then probably one loss out of the two games that you play Bayern. So, I mean, from that point of view, if you get first, I think you should be very happy. And I think you'll get a lot of confidence from beating Bayern. Definitely.
Yeah, I think the way the fixtures have turned out haven't been ideal because I think we're playing Bayern away first up. So that could have the opposite effect. If they win that game, which they expected to, they obviously will start off with a victory and get some momentum. They're doing quite well in the Bundesliga as well now. The only thing I would say is in the kind of biggest game they've had this season in terms of the best opponents they've faced, they got spanked by Leipzig. So I'm hoping and praying for a similar kind of outcome because they were at home in that game as well and they got absolutely battered. So I don't think by any means we're as organised and as well drilled as Leipzig, but you've got to hope that gives you some belief that maybe they'll drop some points somewhere because I do think going away to Galatasaray is going to be hard for everyone. I think that's kind of their crowd, similar to like Anfield, is a bit of an equaliser. So yeah, I'm praying that that it gets a bit messy on that side because you're right. I think the higher likelihood is we fumble it somewhere. I think we've definitely got more form for doing that than Bayern Munich anyway. All right, John. So I think we can wrap up that Champions League. Right, we haven't even started yet with the tournament, so there's not too much chatting we can do. Other than to just make fun of Newcastle, which I will again one more time. Good luck, guys, against
Welcome
PSG.
to the Champions League, lads.
Exactly. Welcome to the big time, Eddie Howe, you Jason Tyndall, you bigger and yeah, good luck. Let's move on now to a special segment. We obviously did the predictions a few weeks ago. Now that the transfer window is pretty much closed globally, I know we've got a few countries still open, but we can't. English clubs can't be adding any players anymore. We thought we'd revisit those. So this is probably the moment that Johnson's going to slap on our predictions from last time. So they were quite close, actually, quite similar. We both had City as champions. We both had Arsenal second, United third, Liverpool fourth. I had Villa fifth. You had Newcastle fifth. I had Brighton sixth. You had Villa sixth. I had Chelsea seventh. You had Chelsea seventh as well. Relegation-wise, we both had Sheffield United and Luton going down. I had Wolves. You had Fulham. Player of the season, we both had Haaland. Young player of the season, we both had Garnacho. Signing of the season, we both had Timber. Flop of the season, I went Tonali, again with the Newcastle theme, and you went with Onana to rattle me. So that was our predictions. Yep. We've got 4 changes we're allowing ourselves. Let's start with you, Jonts. Who are the 4 changes you're going to make? And give me a little bit of a waffle as to why.
Okay, so I wish, and we were saying this when we were going through it, I wish I could have more changes because a lot of these are looking like absolute stinkers at this moment in time. I think in terms of the choices, I definitely was looking at the 3rd and 4th places. I was thinking Man United, Liverpool. Liverpool have looked pretty good so far. And then, obviously a little bit further down, obviously Fulham, my shout to get them down. That they would go down was one I was highly considering because of the fact that they've actually looked pretty decent and they kind of done us, didn't they? So from that perspective, I really wanted to have an extra 2 picks so I could swap those around. And had I done that, I think Liverpool United would have switched. But I have chosen to change my 7th place position. So I had Chelsea. As much as they want to get happy about battering Luton, that's not it, lads. That's not it. All right, lads. That is basically a free 3 points that you're being handed every time you go and play them. And so I've got to change it, as much as it hurts me, to Tottenham and big old Angie, as I call him.
Big
Um,
Angie.
they've looked class, and I'd even have considered moving them up a little bit higher. But I do still think they're a little light squad depth wise. And I think Maddison is a player that is quite injury prone. And I think that they've got, let's say, some players right now that are benefiting maybe from the system. That if they lose Maddison, if they lose Son for a little bit, right? I think they could be in a position where they're not as great as they look right now. So I still think they'll be better than Chelsea though, because Chelsea absolutely stink. But I think Tottenham could get seventh. They could get higher depending on their luck with injuries. Um, and then my other changes, obviously Haaland, you're not going anywhere, mate. Don't try that. But young player of the season, Garnacho. Maybe he's still got a chance if he just comes off the bench every single time. But right now, it's not looking good, Brev. So I'm going to go and change that to Mr. Evan Ferguson. I think De Zerbi, after scoring a hat trick, De Zerbi maybe is the only manager that could bench a player after scoring a hat trick, alongside of maybe Pep. But I think that kind of gives him a good run of games now. And I think based off of that and the fact that Brighton still look like they're really firing well, I think he's going to get a couple more goals in there. And like I've kind of discussed on this podcast before, a lot of the other young players don't get lumped into the young player of the season category really anymore. They've kind of maybe moved on a little bit now. So I think Evan Ferguson is primed for a young player of the season award. I think in terms of signings, I'm going to keep it Arsenal. I think Timber could have had a shout to be the best signing had he not got injured, but I'm going to give it to Rice now, just off of the back of that winner at United and the fact that he doesn't seem to be nervous at all. It doesn't look like he's needed much time to bed into our team, and maybe he's actually going to go and say, get everyone to say actually 100 million was not an overpay for him, which I think so far for every player that's been 100 million outside of maybe Bellingham, everyone's immediately like, nah, that wasn't worth it. Grealish, Enzo, whoever it was, everyone's saying, no, that was too much to be paying. So I think Rice might actually be the first 100 mil plus player to be able to say, actually, that was a decent fee for him. And then lastly, on flop, again, I'm not biased, man. I'm not as biased as people might expect me to be. I'm going to change it from Onana because obviously that was just me trying to rattle people, and because we had exactly the same answers for every single one of the individual awards. And I'm going to change Onana because I think he's going to be probably one of the better parts of your team the whole season. I'm going to change it to Havertz. Again, man's not biased out here. All right. Havertz looks stinky. And I think as stubborn as Arteta is, if he continues to fluff balls like he was, in the Man United game where he's 2 yards from the goal, and I don't even think he made any contact with it. That's how bad it was. Man thinks he's Ang and he's just trying to, control water and air to get the ball to go into the net, but he's clearly not working. So yeah, I'm going to put Havertz down as flop. I think there are some other candidates, but I think Havertz will end up being the biggest flop because of the fact that his own team are already so heavily on him. And obviously flop of the season is heavily is an opinion based award. And I think the fact that Arsenal fans are already piling onto him, he's going to have to do a miracle to turn that around.
Yeah, it's harsh, isn't it? But he has residual flop on him from Chelsea.
Exactly.
And it's hard to address that. But I hear you, man. I think I'm very jealous of your Evan Ferguson shout, because if I, like you were talking and saying earlier, if I had another couple of swapsies, I would really consider that one for Garnacho. But I'm going to stick with him. I'm going to keep the faith with our Argentinian saviour. My swaps, man. I'm dropping Villa from 5th to 7th, and I'm swapping them for the great Tottenham Hotspur and Big Angie and my Australian brothers, because I agree with you. I think they're precariously set. So a few big injuries could really derail their season. because I think they've really improved their starting 11 with signings and also the recapture of form from some of their existing players like Basuma. Pape Sarr stepped in from nowhere. Christian Romero looks good with Van der Ven next to him. The left back, unbelievable. Udogi. Goalie, I'm still not 100% sure with, but I think generally they have a good team. First 11. But yeah, a couple of injuries. Also, I think it'll be tricky for them to get through the African Cup of Nations and an Asian Cup period in the winter where they're going to lose Son, they're going to lose Basuma, they're going to lose Sarr. Who else? I think that's pretty much it. But those are three players that have been pretty key to their start so far. It's just a case of whether Richarlison steps up, whether they find another solution up front. Obviously, Bentancur comes back, whether Højbjerg can fill in and whether their midfield can make up the quality gap. But I believe in them, man. Fifth. Also, we've got to remember, it's fifth. I'm not predicting them to win the league. I'm predicting them to come out the traditional top four by a place. And I think they'll be really happy with that, man. And I think Big Angie's doing a really good job so far. It's very early days, but I just like the guy. You know what I mean? The way he just talks to the way he talks to reporters, he seems very humble and not full of himself. He seems like a real player's coach. And a real people person. So I can't help but like Big Angie. And he's a bit of an underdog, because there are definitely some snobbery things going on in this country when you see him come and he hasn't had the traditional route to the Premier League. We should have learned our lessons. Arsene Wenger didn't have a traditional route. He came from Nagoya or whatever it was in Japan, and he came and he changed the face of English football. So we've got to be respectful and not just dismiss coaches so easily. So, it's not only based on the Tottenham team. I kind of want them to as well. It would be a big middle finger up to all the tacticos and all the up their own journalists and media outlets and people like that who kind of want him to come from. They want the coach to be another Mourinho or a Pep or something like that. And I think it would be great for the game if he gets Spurs playing well, and kind of brings them back to the top six after last season's debacle. Seventh, I'm kicking Chelsea out like you. Sorry, Chelsea fans, or am I? I don't really know, but you guys are out of here. Villa's going to drop down because I still think Villa are going to have a decent season. I know they've had some injuries. I know they've had some shaky away performances at Newcastle and at Liverpool, but Diaby, Watkins, Ramsey.
Mate, they got John McGinn playing prime.
John McGinn's cooking. Well. Yeah, they've got Tielemans can't even make the first 11. They've got some depth, man. And I think eventually Pau Torres will get used to the pace of the league and he'll do all right. And I think they'll do enough to get top 7. It is a close one though because I can't believe Chelsea are going to be this crap throughout the season. I know they proved that they could last season, but can they do it 2 seasons in a row being this rubbish? With Poch, with I don't know, man. It would be beautiful to watch and hilarious for every rival fan to laugh at them because they've literally spent $1 billion in 18 months, and it would prove to a lot of people that cheating and finding little, not cheating might be too harsh, but finding little workarounds and exactly. It doesn't always bring you success. I think it would be a good precedent to set for other clubs that might go around trying to do the same thing. So it would make me happy if they didn't make the top 7 and we're out of Europe again. Let's see what Todd Bowley and the London Cowboys will do if that happens. So yeah, that's my other change. Chelsea out, Villa in at 7th. Relegation is where it gets fun because I'm going to change another team there. Not Luton and Sheffield. Sorry, you guys, you're terrible. You're definitely going down. It's 18th. It's Wolves. So Gary O'Neill, big up the man. Gary O'Neill should have beaten us. We should have had more faith in him. He didn't deserve to get sacked at Bournemouth. The new Spanish Don who's there now probably will get sacked soon as well because they're playing terrible. But I think he'll just about keep them up, even though they've been selling players everywhere and haven't really replaced them. I think they'll get it done. They've got a massive giant, like 7-foot guy up front, Kaladzic or whatever his name is, who will be heading in some goals and putting himself about.
They got Hwang Yi-chan,
Hwang Yi-chan as well. Big up the Asian brothers.
Yeah.
He scored the other day as well, I think.
Yeah, he did. He's pretty much the only player in the team that can score.
Yeah, he's a decent player, man. I like it. I like the look of him, and I think eventually he'll start starting for them because he's too good to come off the bench. But I think they'll just about scrape it, and the team that will go down, and it's unforgivable that they go down because they've literally been pissing about with relegation for about 5 years. They've got a new stadium coming. They're on the only good side of Liverpool that I will actually, like to support, and they're an absolute show. And that is Everton, the Toffees. Oh my God. And I quite like Sean Dyche as well. Dyche. I like Sean Dyche. But my God, are they they're so crap. I like that Beto guy, that you talked about him as well. He puts himself about. Yeah. But I don't think he'll get enough goals. Like, I think he'll be effective, but I don't know if he's an absolute bagsman. And really, the only thing that's going to save them is a bagsman. Because the rest of the team is absolutely poor. Their defence stinks. Their midfield, they sold Iwobi.
They've lost Iwobi.
What are they doing? Like, what the heck are they doing? He's the one midfielder that was actually consistent and working his balls off. I feel like he connected Onana, Gay, and Decore together. He was a really good player for them. They've lost him. They've lost Amari Gray. They got rid of Mope, but that's good for them because he's crap. But yeah, I don't know, man. I just think they can't keep trending downwards and somehow surviving. Like, I thought originally when we did this original predictions, they were going to keep buying a few players. They weren't going to stay, as close to that previous squad as they have done. Dominic Calvert-Lewin keeps getting injured still. Pickford still looks erratic. That defence looks like they're going to leak goals in from every angle. My God. Like, I've never known a team to look this unless you're called Luton or Sheffield United. But they're looking so bad, and eventually, I'm sorry, you've got to be, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep playing this risky game. And the fact that they've got the new stadium coming, they're like, I worry about them surviving, like, as a club. Because if, let's say they go down, the parachute payments kind of keep them going for a season. But if they don't come right back up, that team's screwed, man. They're screwed. We could honestly see a Leeds, Nottingham Forest type thing where we don't see them come back up for 20 years or something like that. Well, yeah, Portsmouth. Even worse financially. But yeah, I think Everton are going to go down. And maybe Dyche will be the right man for that job. Maybe they've been like kind of crisis planning ahead and thought, we'll get Dyche. He kept us up last season, but there's probably another chance we'll go down, so we'll keep him in there and see how it goes. But yeah, man, they look like an absolute shambles of a team.
My major worry with that is that if Sean Dyche's team is letting in goals like they are, and they've got zero outlet to score, just the fact that they're defensively not solid worries me. Because if Sean Dyche can't make them defensively solid, no one can. Just give up and go down.
It's like you've literally got the worst element of Sean Dyche. Generally, his attack is not massively free flowing, and it's a bit of a hard watch to watch their attack. And then you've got something that he should be great at, which he's absolutely failing at, and the defense is absolutely terrible. So you've got the worst end of the stick on both ends of the pitch. How do you survive that? How? Like, I can't imagine other teams are going to be as bad as they're going to be. So, yeah, sorry, Evertonians, you're going down, mate. And the only other change I've done is kind of enforced because we both rated Timber. I still rate him highly, and I hope that he comes back from the injury and he's just as good of a player as he was before. But obviously, he's not really going to see, he's not really going to touch grass for the rest of the season. If he does, it will be right back, at the back end of the season. So I'm going to swap him out for signing of the season and put in James Maddison. So there's a couple of shouts I could have gone for here, to be honest. Liverpool fans will gas up Szoboszlai. I think it's a little bit of a stretch, but I can see how they're happy. They've had absolute dross in midfield, so they're just they're celebrating the first semi decent thing that comes in there. But I think he could turn out to be a really good player. Gas aside, it's just way too early. I think Maddison makes sense, and I'm willing to take that jump because even though he's had good seasons at Leicester, and that's a slightly lower level, I guess you could say, to Tottenham, the way he's just stepped into this role, and he's basically took Son's old role from the Son and Kane partnership, and he's just cooking. He's making runs in behind. He's doing all the things that Maddison can do, but he looks even more dynamic in this Spurs team. And I don't know if it's because of the way that Ange is playing, but yeah, if he manages to stay fit, that's the only thing with him. If he can stay fit, I can see him getting a similar output, if not even better than the output he had at Leicester, and really pushing and driving Spurs to that 5th place. I don't even think it's out of question that they finish higher than that. They could finish 4th, and if they do, a lot of it will have to do with Maddison. Because he's the whole creative outlet right now. And, he's got the benefit of having Pape Sarr and Basuma, who are in those positions at centre mid, doing a lot of the hard graft. And, when they go, you've got Højbjerg and Bentancur, who will do a similar job. So I can't see him not cooking if he's playing. I think in this system, he's going to keep cooking, and he'll be one of Spurs' most important players this season. So yeah, that must hurt you to see an Arsenal player leave and Spurs guy come and take his place. But
I don't mind it. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind it too heavily, to be honest with you, because I think one of the things that really impresses me about Maddison so far when he's been at Tottenham is he's also primed to break down a low block, which appears to be the default response to playing against a team that is a favourite against you, right? For a lot of these mid-table and lower table teams, it's just let's just go into a low block, break down, so these creative teams can't beat us, right? And the Odegaards, the Maddisons, the Brunos, the De Bruynes, the Fodens, those are the only kinds of players that are really able to break down those kinds of things with intricate little passes and through balls. And I think that's going to be really crucial to Tottenham's success because they've looked like a very kind of free-flowing, high-scoring team. And the fact that they can do that even against low-block teams leads me to believe it doesn't really matter who they're playing. They're going to score goals. And I think, as you said, he's going to be involved in essentially all of them. And I even think Son could have an amazing season because of that. Because if Son works out as a number 9 and he shows some of that finishing prowess he showed a couple of seasons ago, that partnership's going to look a bit nuts. That Maddison-Son link-up. It's going to be Maddison-Son out here.
Double Son.
Exactly. They're going to go crazy. So I can easily see that. And given the fee was not crazy and the fact that there wasn't really that much competition for him, that could be one of them dark horse signings where everyone kind of looked at him like, oh, no, we don't want that. He's too, what did Chelsea say? They said he was too old. He was 1 year too old for them. They don't want him.
25.
I feel like that could be a perfect slap in the faces of all of the teams that were just like, nah, we'll go for somebody else. So it would be hurt. It would be hurtful for me as an Arsenal fan to see that because if he is signing of the season, that means that Tottenham have done well. So the combination of those two things would really, really hurt me. I did want to ask you one quick thing. I know it's not technically in the predictions, but just as a quick one, we both got Chelsea not finishing top 7. Where do you actually think they will come then?
I don't think they'll be far out of it. They might finish 8th. I think they could sneak 7th. Because to be honest, of my top 6, City, Arsenal, United, Liverpool, Villa, Brighton, Spurs, Brighton, I'm fairly confident all 6 of those teams will finish in the top 6. Where they exactly fit, like you said, I think Liverpool could easily finish third or even second. I think you guys won't finish lower than third. I'm pretty confident to say that. I could easily see us finish fourth or fifth, or third as well. Which is why I've kept us there. I could see Spurs doing fourth or fifth. I could see Brighton, doing fifth or sixth, maybe fourth if if Evan Ferguson and everything comes together. But I can't see Chelsea being a match for those 6 teams. I just can't. So, Villa are the one kind of vulnerable team in the top 7 who I think Chelsea could take their spot. And I think that would be hilarious if Brighton finished above them again, because they've rinsed them of all the money, sold them Concedo, they're calling him now, which I don't think he will.
That's harsh.
Caicedo will come good.
Yeah.
He's a very good player. But yeah, it would be funny, wouldn't it, if they finished above Chelsea? But I think, 7th, 8th, I really doubt they'll have as bad of a season as last season. But, the evidence is there this season to say, God, I haven't even said West Ham. West Ham have done well. Like, West Ham could finish above Chelsea. They slapped them the other day. Why couldn't they finish above them? I really like what West Ham have done, actually.
Just gotta hope Paqueta doesn't get banned for 9 months or whatever.
Yeah, but even think about it. If Paqueta gets, I feel like the Kudus signing was Paqueta insurance. So if he goes and gets banned eventually, Kudus steps in. He's had 6 months or so to kind of get used to the pace of things. I don't feel like they're going to play him loads in these 6 months unless he, absolutely bangs from the get-go. And then he'll kind of step into the breach when Paqueta probably gets his ban. But
could work out.
West Ham could even finish above Chelsea. I don't think they're quite good enough to finish above the 6 teams that I've put in 1 to 6. But yeah, Chelsea are fighting for scraps, man. I don't think what Pochettino
might
can
that
do
mean that Poch has got to go though, or Poch will go then? If they come 8th, there's going to be some serious pressure on them, given the fact that they've spent $1 billion in 2 seasons. Or yeah, that could be a lot of pressure. And I'm unfortunately I don't like Chelsea, but that would be sad to see. I
like Poch, man.
Stay.
Yeah, I like Poch. It would be sad. The thing is, we don't have enough evidence to know how these American Todd Bowley and those guys act. Really, right? We've only seen it for a season. And that was like one of the worst performing seasons they've ever had. So it's hard to judge whether or not that's how he will be if they do slightly better. I mean, I know everyone jokes about him being an absolute moron and not really knowing much about English football, but even he must understand they've got to get in the top 4. And if they don't get in the top 4, yeah, it's going to be hard for them. Because I feel like the way they've balanced things with all this spending, it's a really precarious situation. If 1 or 2 variables go the wrong way, it can throw the whole, model that they've gone for completely off key. So it really depends when, financially speaking, how big of an impact it has on them. And then, you could see Poch get sacked. I don't know where they go after that. But
mate, they might sandbag it and try and come 8th on purpose so they can keep handing out the 8-year contracts, mate.
True. They might. It's an interesting one, man. Chelsea are just a absolutely bat crazy club. Like Chelsea, Everton, they basically make United look like a peaceful, calm, well-run club. And I thank
Chelsea,
them for
Everton,
that.
and Nottingham Forest are the 3 clubs that are run.
Yeah, but even Forest, I know they sign loads of players.
Crazy logic.
Yeah, they sign loads of players, and the owner looks like a Greek Pavarotti, like an evil one. But Steve
they
Cooper
had no
does a good
shirt
job.
sponsor. They just were like, Steve Cooper, great, I get it, but like, there's something not going on in that geezer's head, because he went with no shirt sponsor for a team that just got promoted last season, right?
Yeah, it
went
was
with no shirt sponsor the whole year, ended up just kind of using it as a tax write-off after like 20 games. I think they've got to be in the conversation for one of the weirdest run clubs that I've seen in the Premier League right now.
As a club, it's a strange approach. Like they've also signed, gazillion players last season and signed quite a few this season. But it seems to be that there's a strange method to their absolute bat crazy madness.
Yeah.
And on the pitch, they've got a sound, stable coach. They've managed to build a decent team. So I think they'll be okay. But yeah, they are definitely run very unorthodoxly. But yeah, I think we'll leave the pod here, Johns. It's been a good one. Lots of stuff to get through. Let's keep a tally on how our predictions are trending throughout the season. These new revised ones, because I'm sure Johnson's about to put them on the screen pretty much anytime soon. And we'll see which one of us is an absolute, who's had the bigger man, who comes out on top. But yeah, thanks, Johns. Great episode. We'll wrap it up here. For those of you watching on YouTube, thanks a lot for watching, obviously. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it if you can. We've just created our first, or not first, it will be the only, official TikTok account. So you can also see a bunch of our best clips and snippets on there as well. We've already been called out a bunch on some of the clips that we've backdated and put out earlier today. So yeah, get involved in the conversation. Tell us we're full of rubbish. Post the snooze emoji if you think we're talking, some boring waffle. All of those things have been done so far. For those of you listening on Spotify, Apple, or any of the audio only platforms, please make sure to follow. If you're on Spotify in particular, give us a 5-star review. Be super helpful. And yeah, we can wrap up here, John. Thanks a lot, man. And speak to you next week, man.
Cheers, mate. Looking forward to getting football back finally.
Yeah, thank God. We need to preview as well, don't we? Oh, we won't even be able to preview. But yeah. What's the matches quickly? Let's do a very impromptu quick preview. Arsenal, I feel like Arsenal are away to Everton.
We've got Everton. Yeah, we've got Everton away. And
what do you think will be the result?
If we don't beat Everton, I don't care whether it's away or at home, I will be livid because they stink, as we talked about. Not only that, but I've also gone to see Everton Arsenal games on too many occasions so far where we haven't delivered what we should have. So, yes, I want a 4-0 battering, come back from the international break and absolutely smash them. I want to hear that silly woo song that they sing. I want to hear that. And then I want to hear 4 goals go in and I want to hear the Arsenal fans going nuts because I've had enough of them lot.
Fair enough.
You guys have got Brighton at home, which is it's a tasty game. How are you feeling about the prospect of Evan Ferguson slapping a hat-trick past you?
Oh, I hope that doesn't happen because apparently, again, the cliched thing is United fan. Don't do that to us. But I think, and I don't know if I think this, I'm praying for a tight win. So that's what I'm going to go for. I'm going to leave the exact score predictions out because I know we'll do a prediction post on social where we'll engage with it. But I'm predicting a tight victory for United. And if not, yeah, we'll be in trouble, I think, for top 4 if we get a draw or a defeat.
You've got Bayern literally the Wednesday after that as well, by the way.
Yeah. We've got a tough return back from the international break. So we really need a victory to kind of kickstart our season. But anyway, that's a nice little impromptu match preview. We've really put thought into that one. But yeah, let's wrap up here, John. Nice one, mate. I'll speak to you next week.
Cheers, folks.
Take care.